Today's story begins with Annalise Edwards, a 48-year-old widow whose world has unraveled since a sudden heart attack took her husband Frank 6 months ago. Annalise wakes at 3:07 a.m. Sleep hasn't visited properly since Frank's death. Tonight, like too many nights, she pads quietly to the kitchen, avoiding the creaky floorboard that used to wake him. In the dim light, Annalise retrieves Frank's favorite coffee mug from the cupboard and settles at the table, forcing herself to confront the foreclosure notice one more time. Eviction in 30 days. Hi, my beautiful family. Let me begin with a prayer straight from the heart. Dear God, please bless every soul watching this video. Fill their lives with peace, joy, and endless love. Amen. Welcome back, my people. You are not just viewers. You are my light during the dark days, and my reason to keep going. To all new family members, welcome to the family. Please subscribe to the channel and introduce yourself in the comments. I truly want to know more about you. My beloved family, every story I bring is not just words. It is my sweat, my sleepless nights, and my sacrifice. When you leave early, it cuts deep as if my hard work is unseen and my voice unheard. Please stay till the end. I love you. Now let's begin the story. She reaches for Frank's photo, fingers brushing the frame where his blue eyes meet hers in eternal warmth. You said you'd take care of us, Frank, she whispers. But how do I take care of myself without you? Annalise's reflection in the window pane stares back, her once vibrant curls now dulled by exhaustion, her face etched with lines that grief has carved too soon. Widowhood has wrapped around her like a heavy fog, locking in the pain while blurring any path forward. The morning alarm buzzes at 6 a.m. Annalise dresses carefully in her one decent interview blouse, the fabric fraying at the cuffs from overuse. Chloe's old room door creaks open, but it's empty, her daughter away at college. Instead, the phone vibrates with a voicemail from the night before. She plays it while pouring cereal, but there's no one to share breakfast with. Another interview, Mom? Chloe's message had asked. Administrative assistant at a downtown firm. Annalise thinks back to her response. It's a good fit. Like my design work, but steadier. She spots the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, a silent reminder of the carpentry business Frank built from nothing, now dissolved into debt. There's gas money in my purse if you need it for campus, she'd texted back. The lawyer called last night, Chloe had added in her message. Something about Dad's will? I'll handle it, sweetheart. The drive to the interview winds through Atlanta's familiar streets. The old print shop where Annalise once designed logos with passion. The park where Frank proposed, ignoring the sideways glances at their interracial love. The hospital where his heart gave out, turning their shared dreams to dust. Each corner a page in a story, now stained with loss and red warnings. She calls the lawyer back from the car, switching to her composed voice. Mrs. Edwards, there's one last asset in your name. A storage unit your husband kept. The words hit like a misplaced hammer strike. A storage unit? She laughs bitterly, gripping the wheel. That's all. Just a mix-up with the paperwork, she imagines telling Chloe. I'll sort it out today. Are you sure, Mom? Because I could defer a semester and come home to help. No way. Your job is to finish that degree, honey. That's what your dad wanted. But Mom, I promise. Chloe, everything will be okay. The interview unfolds much like the last two. The hiring manager, barely out of grad school, nods politely through her resume. You have solid experience in design, Ms. Edwards, but I'm concerned you might find this role underwhelming. Underwhelming, the polite code for too seasoned, too burdened, too much history. Annalise keeps her smile steady. I'm seeking reliability, not a ladder to climb. I'd commit to this fully. We'll reach out by week's end, the manager says, already glancing at the door. The farewell is clipped, obligatory. Annalise makes it to her car, slides in, and sits motionless for precisely 1 minute. No sobs, no fury. Just 60 seconds to let the rejection seep in before she straightens her shoulders. Her phone pings with a text from Chloe. How'd it go? Promising, she types back. She chooses the scenic route home, delaying the hour when she'll have to admit to herself, and maybe Chloe, that the woman who once built a life of security with Frank, defying stares and building dreams, can't even secure a foothold now. As the Atlanta skyline faded in her rearview mirror, Annalise's grip on the steering wheel tightened. The scenic route wound through leafy suburbs that once felt like home, now mocking her with their manicured lawns and untroubled families. She passed the old craft fair grounds where Frank had sold his first hand-carved table, the one that sparked his business. Back then, they'd laughed off the whispers about their marriage. A black woman and a white carpenter defying the South's lingering judgments. Frank's steady hand on her back had made it all bearable. Now, without him, every glance in the mirror felt like a stranger staring back. Her phone buzzed again. Chloe, probably checking in. Annalise silenced it, her mind drifting to the lawyer's words from the car. A storage unit. It sounded absurd, a final insult from a universe that had already taken everything. But what if there was something there? Tools she could sell, maybe, or old would stock to pawn. Anything to buy time before the bank came knocking. She glanced at the GPS, rerouting not toward home, but to the address scribbled on the back of an envelope. The industrial outskirts. Better to face it now than stew in defeat. The storage facility loomed at the edge of town, a squat maze of corrugated metal buildings flanked by chain-link fences and overgrown weeds. Puddles from last night's rain reflected the grey sky, and the air hummed with distant truck engines. Annalise parked her aging sedan in the gravel lot, stepping out into a chill that seeped through her thin blouse. The office door jingled as she entered, the bell cutting through the stale scent of coffee and mildew. Behind the counter stood Mrs. Henson, a weary woman in her late 60s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun and glasses perched on her nose. She looked up from a ledger, her eyes crinkling with faint recognition as Annalise presented the paperwork. Edwards? Frank Edwards. Mrs. Henson adjusted her glasses, scanning the document. Nice man. Always paid in cash, right on time. Shame he stopped coming around. I figured something must have happened. Her voice carried a southern lilt softened by years of dealing with forgotten lives. She didn't pry, but the kindness in her tone made Annalise's throat tighten. Frank had that effect on people. Quiet reliability that stuck with you. Annalise nodded, swallowing hard. He passed away. Heart attack. This unit, it's all that's left. Mrs. Henson's face softened further. I'm sorry, Hon. Let's get you sorted. She grabbed a ring of keys and led the way outside, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel. They walked past rows of identical units, the numbers fading under rust. Wind whistled through the gaps, carrying hints of oil and decay. Unit number 312. Been locked up since his last payment bounced. Lucky you came before I auctioned it off. Folks snap up these mysteries quick. The metal door groaned as Mrs. Henson unlocked it, rolling it up with a rattle that echoed like bones shaking. Inside, the space was a tomb of black trash bags, stacked floor to ceiling in haphazard towers that leaned like forgotten history. Dust motes danced in the sliver of daylight, and the air hit Annalise like a wave, stale, metallic, laced with the faint rot of paper and wood. No neat shelves, no labeled boxes. Just garbage, piled as if Frank had dumped his life's refuse and walked away. Annalise's stomach twisted. This was it? The final thread of her husband's legacy? She turned to Mrs. Henson, words failing her. The older woman shrugged sympathetically. Take your time. Holler if you need boxes or anything. With a pat on Annalise's arm, she shuffled back toward the office, leaving her alone with the shadows. For a long moment, Annalise stood frozen in the doorway, the urge to slam it shut and drive away overwhelming. What was the point? More junk to haul to the curb, more reminders of how everything Frank built had crumbled. But as she scanned the piles, something caught her eye. The bags weren't haphazard after all. Each was tied with precise knots, the plastic pulled taut without a wrinkle. Frank's old habit. Even in chaos, he'd insisted on order. A messy knot means a messy mind, he'd say, his blue eyes twinkling as he fixed her shoelaces or bundled holiday decorations. Curiosity edged out despair. She stepped inside, the concrete cold through her shoes, and tugged at the nearest bag. It split open with a whisper of dust, spilling sawdust that puffed like smoke, mingled with torn cloth rags stiff from age and junk tools. Rusted chisels, a bent hammer, scraps of sandpaper. Useless. She moved to another, her hands trembling slightly. This one held old newspapers yellowed at the edges, headlines from decades past, and shards of broken glass wrapped in faded towels. Her chest tightened. Was this a joke? Frank's idea of a parting gift? She almost gave up, wiping her hands on her pants, when in the corner, half buried under a leaning stack, she spotted a smaller bag. Unlike the others, it was white plastic, less dusty, and marked with masking tape in Sharpie. A. Her initials. In Frank's unmistakable handwriting, the loops, bold and familiar from love notes and grocery lists. Her breath caught. Why this? Why hidden here? She knelt on the gritty floor, ignoring the chill seeping into her knees, and carefully untied the knot. Inside, no trash. Instead, stacks of envelopes, some sealed, others frayed at the edges. Blueprints rolled tightly, sketches of furniture designs she didn't recognize. And photographs, faded Polaroids and glossy prints, yellowed with time. But they weren't of her. Not their wedding in the small Atlanta chapel, or vacations to the coast. These showed a white woman with soft waves in her hair, laughing in a sunlit yard. And a young boy, maybe 5 or 6, with Frank's blue eyes and a gap-toothed grin, clutching a toy truck. Annalise's fingers went numb. Who were they? Strangers in her husband's life, captured in moments she knew nothing about. Confusion swirled into dread, a cold weight settling in her gut. She flipped through the photos, each one a puzzle piece that didn't fit. The woman and boy on a porch swing. The boy blowing out birthday candles. Letters tucked between them, addressed in Frank's hand to Lillian. Words of love, regret. I think of you every day. One day, I'll make it right. Who are you? Annalise whispered, her voice echoing faintly off the metal walls. The unit felt smaller now, the bags looming like witnesses to secrets. Her mind raced. Had Frank had a life before her, one he'd buried so deep even death couldn't unearth it? Or was this something worse? As she shifted the stack, one photo slipped from her grasp, fluttering to the floor. She reached for it, but froze. There was Frank, younger, his hair darker, holding that same boy on his shoulders. Both smiling wide, as if the world held no shadows. The photo lay face up on the cold concrete, Frank's younger self beaming with a joy Annalise hadn't seen in years. She picked it up carefully, as if it might shatter, her fingers tracing the edges. The boy's arms wrapped around Frank's neck, their laughter frozen in time. A father and son. But not hers. Not theirs. Annalise gathered the envelopes and photos, stuffing them back into the bag with numb hands. The unit's shadows stretched longer as the afternoon light faded, but she couldn't stay. Not here, amid the dust and secrets. She locked the door behind her, the clang echoing like a finality, and drove home in a daze. The Atlanta traffic blurred into streaks of headlights, her mind replaying the image over and over. Who was Lillian? And that boy, Elijah, the letters had hinted. What place did they hold in the man she'd shared her life with? By evening, the house felt emptier than ever. Chloe had texted again, sensing something off in Annalise's curt replies, but she couldn't face explaining. Not yet. She skipped dinner, opting instead for a glass of wine that turned into two, and spread the contents of the bag across the kitchen table. The same table where unpaid bills still mocked her. The letters called to her, their envelopes worn from handling, postmarks spanning decades. Some were stamped from Alabama, others from Atlanta before she'd met Frank. All addressed to Lillian Walker, care of a P.O. box that never changed. She started with the oldest, dated 1998, 2 years before she and Frank had crossed paths at that print shop where she'd designed his business cards. Frank's handwriting, steady and deliberate, filled the pages. Dearest Lillian, I know it's been months since we spoke, but Elijah's face haunts me every night. He's growing so fast. Does he still love those model trains? The accident. I replay it endlessly. If I'd been more careful on that job site, if the insurance had covered more, maybe you wouldn't be in that chair. Maybe we'd still be a family. I'm sending what I can this month. Tell him his dad loves him. One day, I'll make this right. Frank. Annalise's breath hitched. An accident? She set the letter down, her mind flashing to Frank's scarred hands, the ones he'd dismissed as old carpenter's marks. Guilt seeped from every word, a man torn by what he'd lost. She opened another, from 2005. Lil. Elijah's birthday came and went. I saw the photo you sent. He's got my eyes, doesn't he? The divorce papers sit unsigned on my desk. I can't bring myself to end it officially, not when part of me still hopes. But the bills, they're drowning us both. I'm starting over in Atlanta. New business, new life. But I'll never stop trying to fix what I broke. Her hands trembled as she unfolded letter after letter, the years unfolding like a hidden diary. Frank's words painted a portrait of lost love. A nurse named Lillian, paralyzed in a car crash Frank blamed himself for, their marriage crumbling under medical debts and custody battles. And Elijah, the son caught in the middle. Frank wrote of birthdays missed, school plays he imagined, a longing that never faded. He's the best part of me, one letter confessed. But I failed him. Deeper in the stack, tucked between faded blueprints of unfinished cribs and dressers, designs Frank must have sketched in quieter moments. She found it. A folded birth certificate, crisp despite its age. The official seal from Alabama stared back. Father, Franklin Edwards. Mother, Lillian Walker. Child, Elijah Walker. Date of birth, March 15th, 1996. The realization crashed over her like a wave. Frank had a son, born 2 years before she'd even met him, before their first date at that hole-in-the-wall diner where he'd made her laugh until her sides ached. Elijah would be, 29 now? A grown man, out there somewhere, carrying Frank's blood while she'd mourned alone. Grief, sharp and familiar, twisted into something hotter, anger. How could he? All those years, building a life with her, whispering promises of forever, while this shadow loomed unspoken. She paced the kitchen, wine forgotten, replaying moments from their marriage. The times he'd grow distant after a phone call, brushing it off as work stress. Nights he'd retreat to his workshop, hammering away until dawn, claiming inspiration. Was it guilt instead? Sorrow for the family he'd left behind? The anger ebbed as quickly as it rose, leaving sorrow in its wake. A deep, aching void. Had she been his true love, or just a second chance? A way to rebuild after losing everything? Their interracial marriage had been his anchor, he'd said, defying the stares because love doesn't see color, it sees souls. But now doubt crept in. The photo of Frank and Elijah mocked her from the table, their smiles unburdened by the secrets that followed. Exhaustion claimed her eventually. She collapsed into bed, the letters scattered like accusations. Sleep came fitfully, dreams weaving through the haze. In them, 2 versions of Frank appeared. The smiling husband she knew, blue eyes warm as he carved a jewelry box for her birthday, his hands steady on hers. Then the haunted stranger, standing in shadows, whispering to a woman in a wheelchair while a boy played at his feet. "Who are you?" she asked in the dream, reaching for him. But he faded, leaving only echoes of regret. By dawn, the first light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the empty side of the bed. Annalise sat up, her head pounding but her resolve sharpening. No more fragments. No more half-truths. She would go back to that unit, tear through every single bag, unearth whatever else Frank had buried. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only way forward, to forgive, or at least to understand. She owed that to herself, and maybe to the man she'd loved. By dawn, the first light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow on the empty side of the bed. Annalise sat up, her head pounding, but her resolve sharpening. No more fragments. No more half-truths. She would go back to that unit, tear through every single bag, unearth whatever else Frank had buried. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only way forward, to forgive, or at least to understand. She owed that to herself, and maybe to the man she'd loved. She moved through the morning like a woman on a mission, the haze of last night's revelations fueling her steps. Coffee brewed strong and black, untouched as she rummaged through the hall closet for supplies. Gardening gloves from Frank's old toolkit, stained with soil from weekends they'd spent planting azaleas in the yard. Empty cardboard boxes from the attic, flattened and dusty from disuse. A flashlight from the junk drawer, its beam tested with a flick to ensure it pierced the darkness ahead. She dressed in practical clothes, jeans that hung looser now from months of skipped meals, a faded sweatshirt that still carried the faint scent of Frank's cologne, and sturdy boots to navigate the grit. Chloe called as Annalise loaded the car, her voice tinny through the speakerphone. "Mom, you sound off. Did the interview go okay? And what's this about a storage unit?" Annalise hesitated, the engine idling in the driveway. "It's nothing, sweetie. Just some old stuff of your dad's. I'll fill you in later." A white lie, but necessary. Chloe had her own life at college. Exams, friends, a future untainted by this mess. Annalise ended the call with promises of love, her heart aching at the distance she'd created, even if it was for protection. The drive to the storage facility felt shorter this time, the industrial outskirts rising like a familiar spectre. The sky hung heavy with clouds, threatening rain, but Annalise pressed on, parking in the same gravel spot as before. Mrs. Henson waved from the office window, her kind eyes noting the determination in Annalise's stride. "Back already? Need help hauling?" Annalise shook her head, managing a tight smile. "I've got it. Thanks." She unlocked unit number 312 herself this time, the door rolling up with a protesting screech that echoed her inner turmoil. The bags loomed as they had yesterday, black sentinels guarding Frank's hidden world. But today, armed with purpose, Annalise dove in. She donned the gloves, their rough texture grounding her, and dragged the first bag into the center of the floor. The flashlight clicked on, its beam cutting through the dim interior like a knife through fog. Dust swirled as she untied the knot, Frank's precise handiwork again, and poured out the contents. Sawdust cascaded first, fine and golden, remnants of projects long abandoned. Then came unfinished furniture pieces, a half-carved chair leg, its curves elegant but incomplete, as if Frank had set it down mid-stroke and never returned. Annalise ran her fingers over the wood, feeling the grooves where his chisel had bitten in. This was the Frank she knew, the craftsman whose hands turned raw lumber into art. But why hide it here? She set it aside in one of the boxes, labeling it mentally as salvageable, though her heart whispered it was more than that, a piece of him. The next bag revealed family photos, not the ones from their albums at home. Her and Frank at barbecues, Chloe's baby pictures. But strangers. Or not strangers, she corrected herself, remembering the letters. Lillian in a nurse's uniform, smiling proudly outside a hospital. Elijah as a toddler, chubby-cheeked and giggling on a blanket. And Frank younger, his face unlined by the years they'd shared, holding them both in a group shot that screamed domestic bliss. Annalise's breath caught. These weren't just mementos, they were evidence of a life erased. She stacked them carefully, her mind flashing to their own wedding photos, where Frank's eyes had held only her. Or had they? Deeper bags yielded carving tools, rusted but familiar. A set of gouges Frank had once shown her, claiming they'd been his grandfather's. Now she wondered if that was true, or if they'd come from his life with Lillian. Military medals tumbled out next, bronze stars and ribbons from Frank's brief stint in the army, right after high school. He'd mentioned it once, dismissively, over dinner. Just a kid playing soldier. But here they were, pinned to a faded uniform patch, symbols of honor he'd never displayed. Why bury this pride? Annalise polished one with her glove, the metal cool against her skin, and tucked it into her pocket. A keepsake, or perhaps a clue. Letters of apology surfaced in another bag, crumpled and tear-stained. Not to Lillian this time, but to Elijah. Short notes on scraps of paper. "Son, I'm sorry I missed your game. Work's been tough. Elijah, your mom says you're acing math. Proud of you, buddy. Wish I could be there." The dates aligned with the journals she'd glimpsed last night, gaps widening as years passed. Annalise's eyes burned. Frank had longed for his boy, yet chosen silence with her. The sorrow twisted deeper, mingling with betrayal. Had he feared her judgment? Or was their love built on omission? The journals came next, leather-bound volumes hidden in a bag of old rags. There were 5 in total, spanning from the early 90s to just before their marriage. Annalise sat cross-legged on the concrete, flashlight propped beside her, and opened the first. Frank's handwriting filled the pages, neat at first, then increasingly erratic. June 1994. Married Lillian today in the little chapel off Route 65. She's everything, smart, kind, that laugh that lights up a room. Alabama sun shone like a blessing. Can't believe she chose me, a rough carpenter with calluses for hands. Annalise's heart clenched. Lillian, the nurse from Alabama, vibrant and whole in these words. She flipped ahead, the entries painting a honeymoon phase of joy. Picnics, dreams of a family, Frank's budding business. But then the tone shifted. March 1997, the accident. God, why? Slick roads after the storm. I swerved too late. Lillian's car totaled, her spine shattered. Doctors say she'll never walk again. Elijah's only a year old. He needs his mom. And me? I'm the fool who caused it. Working overtime now to cover the bills, but it's never enough. Page after page detailed the spiral. Hospital visits, Lillian's pain, Elijah's confused cries. Debt mounted like a storm, medical loans, therapy costs, Frank's business faltering under the strain. He wrote of arguments, Lillian's bitterness, his own guilt eating him alive. December 1999. Lost the house today. Foreclosure notice came like a death sentence. Lillian's moving in with her sister. Says she can't look at me without remembering. Custody hearing next week. I'll fight for Elijah, but what kind of father am I? Broken. The divorce entries were raw, ink smudged as if by tears. April 2000, it's done. Papers signed. Lillian gets full custody. I get weekends, if I can afford the drive. Elijah asked for me last night, ripped my heart out. Starting over in Atlanta. New name for the business, fresh start. But how do you outrun shame? Annalise closed the journal, tears streaming unchecked. This was the man she'd married, the one who'd rebuilt himself atop buried shame and failure. Their life together, the comfortable home, the carpentry success, it had all been a second act, constructed on the ruins of his first. No wonder he'd been so protective, so insistent on stability. He'd lived the loss once, he couldn't bear it again. But why not tell her? Their interracial marriage had weathered stares and whispers. Surely she could have handled this truth. Or had he feared it would shatter the illusion of their perfect union? She wiped her face, pressing on through more bags. Old receipts from Alabama mingled with Atlanta business cards, a timeline of reinvention. A photo album dedicated to Elijah's milestones. First steps, school plays, a teenage graduation Frank had annotated in the margins. Missed this one. Sent a card. The emotional layers peeled back like onion skins, each revealing more pain, more love unspoken. Hours blurred as the flashlight dimmed, batteries waning. Annalise's back ached from kneeling, her gloves filthy with dust. She'd filled 3 boxes with keepsakes, tools to sell, photos to ponder, medals to honor. But amid the remnants, one detail stood out, tucked in the far corner behind a stack of splintered wood. A wooden crate, about the size of a hope chest, sealed with nails and wax. No trash bag concealed it. It sat deliberate, as if waiting. The lid bore words carved deeply into the oak, Frank's craftsmanship evident in the precise lettering. To be opened only if I don't make it back. Annalise's pulse quickened. Back from where? The war? A trip? Or some metaphorical journey through his regrets? The crate was heavy, its sides reinforced with metal bands, a faint scent of varnish lingering like a ghost. She hesitated, the flashlight beam trembling on the inscription. Part of her wanted to pry it open here, in this metal tomb, to confront whatever final secret it held. But the unit felt too exposed, too impersonal. This deserved privacy, the quiet of her home. Sensing it held the final piece of his story, she dragged it toward the door, muscles straining against its weight. Rain had started outside, pattering on the roof like impatient fingers. Mrs. Henson helped her load it into the car. No questions asked, just a knowing nod. Take care, Hon. Some things are meant to be found slow. The drive home was a slog through slick streets, the crate thumping in the trunk with every pothole. Annalise's mind raced. What could be inside? More letters? Valuables? Or something darker? A confession that would upend everything? She pulled into the garage, the door rumbling shut behind her, sealing her in with the mystery. On the garage floor, surrounded by Frank's old workbench and scattered tools, she sat staring at the box. The rain drummed a steady rhythm overhead, mirroring her heartbeat. "What else did you keep from me, Frank?" she whispered, her voice breaking the silence like a crack in wood. The crate loomed before her, its oak surfaces worn smooth by time, the carved inscription mocking her with its finality. "To be opened only if I don't make it back." Annalise traced the letters with her fingertip, feeling the depth of each groove. Frank's handiwork, deliberate and unyielding, just like the man himself. The garage smelled of oil and sawdust, remnants of his countless projects, the air thick with the storm's humidity seeping through the cracks. She shivered, not from the chill, but from the weight of anticipation. What could be inside? More letters to haunt her? Proof of deeper deceptions? Or nothing at all, a final, empty echo of his secrets? She rose slowly, knees protesting from the hard concrete, and scanned the workbench. Tools lay in disarray, frozen in the chaos of Frank's last days. Screwdrivers, clamps, a half-finished birdhouse he'd been carving for Chloe's birthday. Her eyes landed on his old hammer, the one with the hickory handle polished from years of use. It had built their home, framed walls, hung pictures, fixed leaks during Atlanta's relentless summers. Now it would break open his last barrier. Annalise picked it up, the weight familiar in her palm, like shaking hands with a ghost. "If this is what you wanted," she murmured, "then show me." The first swing glanced off the lock, a dull thud that vibrated up her arm. Rain pounded harder, as if urging her on. She adjusted her grip, channeling the anger from last night's revelations. The journals, the birth certificate, the life Frank had erased. Another swing, sharper this time, and the lock buckled with a metallic snap. Wood splintered around the hasp, shards flying like accusations. Annalise pried the lid open, hinges creaking in protest, revealing, not chaos, but order. Nestled inside, wrapped in a faded American flag, the one Frank had kept from his army days, was a fireproof safe, compact and unassuming, its black surface gleaming dully under the garage's fluorescent light. Her breath caught. The flag's stars and stripes evoked memories of Frank's rare stories about his service. A young man from rural Alabama, drafted into a world far from home, returning changed but silent about the details. He'd fold it meticulously each Veterans Day, tucking it away without fanfare. Now, it cradled this secret, taped at the bottom with a small key on a ring. Annalise unfolded the fabric carefully, as if disturbing a grave, and retrieved the key. It was cold against her skin, engraved with a tiny FE. His initials, a personal touch that twisted the knife deeper. Why this elaborate hiding? What was so precious, or damning, that it needed such protection? She inserted the key, the lock turning with a soft click that echoed in the quiet garage. The safe's door swung open, revealing stacks of documents and bundles tied with rubber bands. No more junk, no faded photos. This was deliberate, valuable. Bundles of cash first, crisp $100 bills, sorted into neat packets, totaling. She thumbed through one, estimating thousands. Then land deeds, yellowed but official, stamped by Alabama County clerks. And bank bonds, crisp certificates in protective sleeves, each bearing her name. Annalise May Edwards. Her full name, as if Frank had foreseen this moment, ensuring no one else could claim it. A note lay atop the pile, folded once, in Frank's familiar script. Her hands shook as she unfolded it, the paper whispering against her fingers. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I wanted to tell you the truth, about my first family, about the mistakes I couldn't fix. I sold my share of the old family land before I died. It's worth more than you think. Use it to start over. Don't let guilt bury you like it did me. Love always, Frank. The words blurred as tears welled, spilling hot down her cheeks. Relief crashed over her first, a tidal wave of financial salvation. The bonds alone, she calculated roughly, totaled around $180,000, enough to pay off the mortgage, settle the debts from the failed carpentry business, maybe even seed a new beginning. No more foreclosure notices, no more lying to Chloe about mix-ups with tuition. The house, their home, could stay hers. Frank had provided, even from beyond the grave. But betrayal surged in its wake, a bitter undercurrent that choked her sobs. How long had he planned this? Sold the land, his family's land, tied to the life with Lillian and Elijah, without a word? The note's confession rang hollow. He'd had years to tell the truth, yet chosen silence. Their marriage, built on love and defiance against Atlanta's subtle judgments. The stares at the grocery store, the whispers at neighborhood barbecues, now felt tainted. Had he seen her as a fresh start, a way to outrun his guilt, while stashing away this safety net like a guilty conscience? She clutched the note, crumpling it slightly, anger mingling with grief. "You coward," she whispered, though the word tasted like ash. He'd been her anchor, the white man with soft blue eyes who'd chosen her, a black print designer with dreams bigger than the South's expectations. They'd built something real, or so she'd thought. Annalise wiped her eyes, setting the note aside to sift deeper. Among the deeds was a folded map, creased from handling, marking a plot in rural Alabama, rolling hills near Birmingham, dotted with streams and old-growth trees. The title read, E. Walker Trust, the initials jumping out like a beacon. Elijah Walker, Frank's son. The land wasn't just any inheritance. It was the remnant of his first life, sold but preserved in trust. Annotations in Frank's hand noted mineral rights, potential development value, farms turning to suburbs, worth escalating in today's market. But why title it to a trust with Elijah's name? Annalise's mind raced, piecing it together. Frank had intended her to inherit everything: the cash, the bonds, the proceeds from the sale. A clean break for her, unburdened by his past. Yet the trust's name hinted at unfinished business. He'd meant to reconcile with the son he'd abandoned, perhaps use the land as a bridge. One day, I'll make it right, as his letters to Lillian had promised. But death had come too soon, the heart attack stealing his chance. Now, The weight fell to her. Was this wealth a gift or a curse? Relief warred with moral quandary. Keeping it all would secure her future, but at what cost to Elijah, the boy, now man, who'd grown up without a father? She leaned back against the workbench, the hammer still in her lap, and let the tears flow freely. Flashbacks assaulted her. Their first meeting at the print shop, Frank's shy smile as he admired her designs. "You've got an eye for beauty," he'd said, his gaze lingering on her. Their wedding, small and intimate, Frank's vows promising eternal security. Lazy Sundays in the workshop, where he'd teach her to sand wood, their hands intertwined, black and white, a symbol of unity he'd carved into a plaque above their bed. But now those memories fractured. The distant nights he'd stare out the window, lost in thought. She'd attributed it to business worries. Was it Elijah instead? Lillian's pain? The accident that had shattered his world before rebuilding it with her? The rain eased to a drizzle, the garage growing dim as evening crept in. Annalise gathered the contents back into the safe, except for the note and map, which she clutched like lifelines. Relief ebbed into exhaustion, betrayal softening to a dull ache. Frank hadn't been perfect. No one was. His guilt had buried him, as the note confessed, but in death he'd tried to free her from the same fate. The interracial love they'd shared, defying odds, building a family with Chloe, had been real, even if incomplete. Perhaps this was his way of atoning, giving her the means to thrive, while leaving breadcrumbs to his son. But the trust's title nagged at her. Elijah deserved his share, didn't he? A piece of the father he'd lost. Annalise pulled out one of the photos from the storage unit bag she'd brought home. The one of young Elijah on Frank's shoulders. Time had faded the colors, but the boy's eyes stared out with a grown man's intensity, blue like Frank's, holding questions she'd never asked. Who was he now? A firefighter, perhaps, or a teacher, living in Birmingham, unaware of this hidden legacy. "You deserve to know," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tears. The words hung in the air, a promise to herself as much as to the stranger in the photo. Tomorrow, she'd search for him, bridge the gap Frank couldn't. For now, in the quiet garage, wealth and truth collided, reshaping her grief into something sharper. Purpose. The rain had stopped, leaving the garage cloaked in a damp stillness that mirrored Annalise's unease. She sat on the cold concrete, the safe's contents spread around her like a puzzle she couldn't solve. The bundles of cash, the bonds in her name, the map of Alabama land titled to the E. Walker Trust. Each item a lifeline and a burden. Frank's note lay in her lap, its words burned into her memory. Use it to start over. Don't let guilt bury you like it did me. But guilt was already creeping in, wrapping around her heart like ivy. This wealth could save her. Pay off the foreclosure, clear Chloe's tuition, rebuild the life that had crumbled since Frank's heart attack 6 months ago. Yet the name on the trust, Elijah Walker, whispered of a debt unpaid, a son abandoned. Annalise gathered the papers, tucking them back into the safe, and carried it inside to the kitchen table. The same table where she'd faced unpaid bills and foreclosure notices under Frank's frozen smile in their last photo together. The house was too quiet, Chloe's absence at college amplifying the weight of her decision. Keep the money, and no one would know. It was hers legally, undeniably. Frank had chosen her, named her, ensured her future. But the photos of Elijah, his blue eyes so like Frank's, stared back from the pile. A boy who'd grown up without a father, unaware of this hidden legacy. Could she live with herself, knowing she'd taken what might rightfully be his? Morning broke grey and heavy, the Atlanta skyline muted through the window. Annalise brewed coffee, the ritual grounding her as she wrestled with her conscience. She imagined calling Chloe, confessing everything. The storage unit, the letters, the son Frank had never mentioned. Chloe would be practical, her voice sharp with youthful certainty. "Mom, it's yours. Dad left it to you. Why give it away to a stranger?" But Elijah wasn't a stranger, not entirely. He was Frank's blood, a piece of the man she'd loved, the man who'd built their interracial marriage against the South's whispers, who'd promised her a good life. Keeping the money felt like betraying that love, as much as Frank's silence had betrayed her. She opened her laptop, the screen's glow harsh in the dim kitchen. If she was going to decide, she needed to know who Elijah was now. A quick search for Elijah Walker, Birmingham, Alabama, brought up a LinkedIn profile. Elijah Walker, 29, firefighter at Birmingham Fire Station 22. A photo showed a man with Frank's jawline, his blue eyes tempered by years of hard work. Articles linked him to community outreach, teaching kids fire safety, volunteering at shelters. A good man, it seemed, carving his own path. Did he even think of Frank anymore? Or was his father just a faded memory, like the photos in the storage unit? Annalise's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could close the tab, lock the safe, and move on. The bonds, $180,000, could save their home, maybe restart Frank's carpentry business under her name. She pictured a workshop filled with women like her, widows, single mothers, rebuilding through craft. But the map in the safe nagged at her. Alabama land, tied to Elijah's trust. Frank had sold it, yes, but the trust's name suggested intent. A bridge to his son, a way to make it right, as his letters to Lillian had vowed. Keeping it all felt like stealing, not from a stranger, but from Frank's redemption. She pulled out a notepad, one of Frank's old ones with sawdust still caught in the spiral. Her hand shook as she began a letter, the act feeling as intimate as the love notes they'd once exchanged. "Dear Elijah, you don't know me, but I was your father's wife, Annalise Edwards. Frank passed away 6 months ago, and I've learned things about him, about you, that I never knew. Enclosed are photos, a birth certificate, and a note he left. I think he'd want you to have them. I'd like to meet, if you're willing, to share what I know of the man he became." She included the photo of young Elijah on Frank's shoulders, the birth certificate, and a copy of Frank's final note, careful not to promise anything about the money. Not yet. She sealed the envelope, her heart pounding as she drove to the post office. The clerk's casual, "Anything fragile?" felt absurd against the weight of what she was sending. "Just important," she replied, sliding it across the counter. Weeks passed in a haze of routine, job applications, dodging Chloe's calls, avoiding the safe now locked in her bedroom closet. Each day, she checked the mail with a mix of dread and hope, expecting silence or rejection. The foreclosure notice loomed, the bank's deadline now 2 weeks away. Chloe came home for a weekend, her presence a bittersweet distraction. Over dinner, Annalise confessed part of the truth. The storage unit, the letters, Elijah. She left out the money, unsure how to explain. "Mom, this is crazy," Chloe said, her fork paused midair. "Dad had a kid? And you found this now? The money, the bonds, it's yours. He left it to you, not some guy he hadn't seen in years. You're the one facing eviction." Her voice was fierce, protective, but Annalise saw the fear in her eyes. Fear of losing their home, their stability. "I know, baby. Annalise said, squeezing her hand. But it doesn't feel right. Not yet. This Elijah, he's part of your dad. I need to know what he meant to him. Chloe shook her head, muttering about fairness, but hugged her tightly before leaving for campus. Alone again, Annalise felt the pull of both choices. Justice for Elijah or security for herself. Frank's note haunted her. Don't let guilt bury you. Was she honoring him by seeking his son, or defying him by questioning his gift? Then, one rainy afternoon, a reply arrived. The envelope was plain, postmarked from Birmingham, the handwriting unfamiliar but steady. Ms. Edwards, I got your letter. I haven't thought about my dad in years. Not since I was a kid. Mom passed a while back, and I figured that was the end of it. Your words, they stirred things up. I'd like to meet, not for answers, but to know the woman who knew my father better than I did. Name a time and place. Elijah Walker. Annalise read it twice, her hands trembling. He didn't ask about money, only connection. She sat at the kitchen table, the same place where she'd first faced Frank's secrets, and drafted a response. A coffee shop in Birmingham, neutral ground, next Saturday. She included her number, her heart racing at the thought of his voice. Would it carry Frank's cadence, his warmth? The days before the meeting crawled by. Annalise busied herself with small tasks. Cleaning the house, sorting more of the storage unit's keepsakes, polishing Frank's military medals until they gleamed. She avoided the safe, its contents a Pandora's box she wasn't ready to face. At night, she dreamed of Frank again. Not the haunted stranger from before, but her husband, standing in their old backyard, carving intertwined hands into oak, one black, one white. You always knew the right thing, he said in the dream, his smile soft. But when she woke, the right thing felt murky, a line blurred between justice and guilt. Saturday morning, Annalise rose before dawn, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. She dressed carefully, simple slacks, a blouse that didn't scream desperation, her hair pulled back to hide the grey creeping in. The drive to Birmingham was 2 hours, the highway cutting through Georgia's red clay hills into Alabama's rolling green. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel, the map from the safe tucked into her purse beside Elijah's letter. She passed landmarks that felt like echoes. A diner like the one where Frank proposed, a church that could have been Lillian's chapel from his journals. Each mile tightened the knot in her chest, knowing this meeting would change everything. In Birmingham, the city buzzed with morning energy. Families at farmers' markets, traffic weaving through downtown. The coffee shop was a small brick building off a quiet street, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. Annalise parked, her palms sweaty despite the cool air. She clutched the purse with Frank's photo of Elijah, the one from his shoulders, as if it could anchor her. Inside, she'd meet a man who carried half of Frank's story, a man who might claim half of her future. Justice or guilt? The question lingered, unanswered, as she stepped toward the door, her heart pounding with the weight of truth. But as she reached for the handle, a wave of hesitation hit. The coffee shop's chatter felt too public, too exposed for what lay ahead. She pulled out her phone, texting Elijah quickly. *, can we meet somewhere quieter? There's a diner nearby, Mary's Place, on 5th Avenue 11 a.m. *, his reply came within minutes. * works for me. See you there. *, Annalise exhaled, relieved. A diner was better, reminiscent of her first date with Frank, a place where honest conversations could unfold over chipped mugs and worn booths. Mary's place sat a few blocks away, its neon sign flickering in the morning light, the scent of bacon and coffee drifting through the open door. Annalise arrived early, choosing a booth in the back corner, away from the clatter of dishes and the hum of weekend regulars. The vinyl seat squeaked under her, and she smoothed her blouse, the same one she'd worn to countless failed interviews, now carrying her into this uncharted moment. She set the photo of young Elijah on the table, beside a small folder with copies of Frank's note and the birth certificate. Her hands trembled as she sipped water, the ice clinking in rhythm with her nerves. At 11:02, the door chimed, and a man walked in. Mid-30s, tall, with broad shoulders under a Navy firefighter's jacket. His eyes, Frank's calm, piercing blue, scanned the room before locking onto hers. But his expression carried a cautious edge, a guardedness that reminded her of the photos of Lillian, not Frank. Elijah Walker. He approached slowly, as if testing the ground, and slid into the booth across from her. Up close, the resemblance was uncanny. Frank's jawline, the slight tilt of his head, but tempered by a wariness that spoke of years without a father. Annalise. His voice was low, steady, with a faint Alabama drawl. She nodded, her throat tight. Elijah, thank you for coming. The words felt formal, inadequate for the weight of the moment. He glanced at the photo on the table, his jaw tightening, but said nothing. The waitress appeared, breaking the tension with a cheerful offer of coffee. They both ordered, black for him, cream and sugar for her, and waited in silence as she poured, the moment stretching taut. Annalise spoke first, her voice soft but deliberate. I didn't know about you until a week ago. Found your father's storage unit. Letters, photos, your birth certificate. He never told me. She slid the folder toward him, her fingers lingering on the edge. I loved him, Elijah. For 20 years. We built a life, a daughter, a home. But now I'm wondering how much of it was real. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, the diner's checkered floor blurring through unshed tears. Elijah opened the folder, his hands steady but slow, as if bracing for impact. He studied the photo, himself at 5, on Frank's shoulders, his expression unreadable. I haven't seen this in years, he said finally. Mom kept some pictures, but not this one. He set it down, meeting her gaze. You said he passed. Heart attack. Annalise nodded, swallowing hard. 6 months ago. Sudden. Left me with debts, a failing business, and this. She gestured to the folder, the weight of the safe's contents unspoken, but heavy between them. He leaned back, arms crossed, the firefighter's jacket creasing. I don't know what you want from me, Ms. Edwards. My dad walked out when I was 7. Mom said he couldn't handle her accident, the bills me. I grew up thinking he didn't care. His voice was even, but pain flickered in his eyes, a wound decades old. She passed 5 years ago. Cancer. I figured that was the end of his story. Until your letter. Annalise took a breath, steadying herself. I found his journals. He wrote about you, Elijah. Every birthday, every milestone he missed. He blamed himself, for the accident, for losing you and your mom. Lillian, right? Elijah's nod was curt, his lips a thin line. She pressed on, the words spilling out. He was in a car crash, wasn't he? Left her paralyzed, bankrupted them. He lost custody, moved to Atlanta, started over. That's when he met me. I was a print designer, young, clueless about his past. We fell in love, built a life. But he never told me about you. I'm still angry about that. The coffee arrived, steam curling between them like a veil. Elijah sipped his, staring into the black liquid. Mom never talked bad about him, even after he left. Said he was a good man who broke under pressure. I stopped asking when I was a teenager. Figured he'd moved on, had a new family. He glanced at her, the question unspoken but clear. We have a daughter, Chloe, Annalise said. She's in college now. Frank adored her, built her a treehouse, taught her to carve. He was everything to us. Her voice wavered, and she clenched her hands under the table. But finding you, it's like meeting a ghost of him. I don't know what's fair anymore. Elijah's expression softened, just a fraction. Fair's a tough word. I'm not here to take anything from you. I've got a life, fire station, friends, a mortgage of my own. But knowing he thought of me, he tapped the photo. That's worth something. He paused, then added, what else was in that unit? The question hung heavy, the diner's hum fading to a distant buzz. Annalise's heart pounded. This was it, the moment of choice. She could lie, keep the wealth, secure her future. But Frank's note echoed, don't let guilt bury you. She took a deep breath. There was a safe. Cash, bonds, deeds, about $180,000, all in my name. And a map to land in Alabama, titled to an E. Walker Trust. Your name. He sold his family's land before he died, left the money for me. But I think he meant for you to have a piece of it too. Elijah's eyes widened, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his mouth. $180,000? And he never said a word. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. Sounds like Dad, always hiding the big stuff. He set the mug down, leaning forward. I don't want your money, Miss Edwards. I didn't come here for a payout. Annalise, she corrected gently. And I'm not offering it because I have to. I'm offering because it's right. Half. You take half for you, for your mom's memory, for whatever he owed you. Her voice was firm now, the decision crystallizing. I can't keep it all, knowing what I know. He studied her, those blue eyes searching for deceit and finding none. Half's too much. I've got no claim to your life with him. He paused, then added, but there's something I'd want, if you're serious. Annalise tilted her head, waiting. That land, the trust. Mom used to talk about it, said it was where Dad grew up, where they dreamed of raising me. It's just sitting there, isn't it? Overgrown, forgotten? She nodded, picturing the map's rolling hills, the potential Frank had annotated. Yeah, it's rural, near Birmingham. Could be worth more now, with development. Then let's use part of the money to restore it, Elijah said, his voice gaining strength. Not for profit, for something better. A community space, maybe. For kids, families, people who need a place to heal. Like Mom needed. Like Dad never got. His eyes met hers, no longer cautious but alive with possibility. You in? Annalise's throat tightened, tears threatening again. This wasn't just about money. It was about Frank's unfinished redemption, a way to honor both their lives with him. I'm in, she whispered, a smile breaking through. They spent the next hour talking, the tension easing into something like kinship. Elijah shared fragments of his childhood, Lillian's strength despite her wheelchair, his own path to firefighting, a way to save others where he couldn't save his family. Annalise told him of Frank's later years, the carpentry business, Chloe's laughter, the way he'd carve unity into every piece. By the time they left the diner, the folder of photos and documents felt lighter, shared between them. Let's see it, Elijah suggested as they stepped into the crisp Birmingham air. The land. It's not far. Annalise agreed, her car following his pickup through winding roads to a rural stretch outside the city. The property was as the map promised, overgrown with wild grass and tangled vines, but vast, edged by ancient oaks and a creek that gurgled softly. They walked the perimeter, boots sinking into the earth, the silence between them comfortable now. Standing in the grass, Elijah kicked at a clump of weeds, his gaze distant. This could be something good. For both of us. Annalise nodded, seeing it too. A community garden, maybe, or a workshop where kids could learn crafts, like Frank had taught Chloe. They weren't rivals for Frank's memory, she realized, but extensions of his hope, his attempt to mend what he'd broken. As the sun dipped low, casting golden light over the land, Annalise felt a weight lift. Frank's secrets had torn her apart, but here, with his son, they were building something new, a legacy not of guilt, but of healing. Months later, the air in Atlanta carried the crisp bite of spring, a season of renewal that mirrored Annalise's own. The foreclosure notices were gone, paid off with a chunk of the $90,000 she'd kept from Frank's bonds. The rest she'd wired to Elijah, honoring their agreement to split the inheritance. Her home, their home, hers and Chloe's, was safe, its walls no longer echoing with dread but humming with purpose. She stood in the driveway, staring at the old carpentry workshop attached to the garage, its windows boarded since Frank's death. Dust motes danced in the slants of morning light filtering through the cracks, and she could almost hear his hammer, steady and sure, shaping wood into dreams. The idea had come to her one sleepless night, after the Birmingham meeting. Frank's legacy wasn't just in the money or the land. It was in his craft, his ability to build beauty from raw materials. She'd reopen his workshop, but not as a shadow of his past. It would be something new, something that gave others what she'd clawed her way toward, a second chance. She named it Redemption Works. The words painted in bold white letters across a reclaimed oak sign, hung above the workshop door. Beneath it, she nailed Frank's old carving, two intertwined hands, one black, one white, a symbol of the unity he'd cherished, now a beacon for her mission. Annalise spent weeks transforming the space. She sanded down workbenches, their surfaces scarred from years of Frank's labor, and replaced rusted tools with gleaming new ones, funded by the bonds. She posted flyers at community centers, churches, and veteran halls, seeking employees who'd been overlooked like she had. Widows staring down empty futures, veterans carrying invisible wounds, single mothers juggling too many burdens. The first hire was Marla, a 42-year-old widow whose husband had died in a construction accident, her hands eager to learn woodworking to support her two boys. Then came Javier, a Marine veteran with steady hands and a quiet demeanor, and Tosha, a single mom whose quick wit hid years of financial strain. Together, they breathed life into the workshop, their laughter and hammer strikes filling the silence Frank left behind. Meanwhile, in Alabama, Elijah was carving his own path. He'd used his share of the inheritance to begin restoring the family land, a sprawling 40 acres of rolling hills and ancient oaks near Birmingham. The trust's funds cleared the overgrowth, revealing a landscape ripe with possibility. He envisioned a retreat, a place for community healing, where families could gather, kids could learn skills, and those weighed by loss could find purpose. He'd texted Annalise photos, cleared fields, a new gravel path, the skeleton of a pavilion rising against the skyline. "This is for Mom, for Dad, for all of us," he'd written. She smiled at the words, picturing Frank's pride. Chloe came home for spring break, her college textbooks swapped for a laptop and a marketing plan. At 20, she had her father's focus and her mother's creativity, her fingers flying as she built a website for Redemption Works. "Mom, this is bigger than a workshop," she said one evening, her voice bright over a pizza dinner. "You're giving people hope. We need to tell the world." She designed sleek logos, posted on social media, and crafted a tagline: "Building futures, one piece at a time." Orders trickled in, custom tables, bookshelves, even a church requesting pews. Chloe's posts went viral locally, drawing customers from Atlanta's suburbs, eager for handmade furniture with a story. The workshop hummed daily. Annalise taught Marla to carve dovetail joints, her hands guiding the chisel with a patience she'd learned from Frank. Javier took to sanding, his precision turning rough planks into mirror-smooth surfaces. Tosha, a natural with clients, handled orders with a warmth that turned strangers into regulars. The space smelled of fresh-cut cedar and varnish, a scent that carried Annalise back to weekends with Frank, when they'd work side by side, her designing patterns, him shaping wood. But now, it was her vision taking form, her strength holding it together. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the workshop's newly cleaned windows, Annalise paused to sand a dining table, its oak grain warm under her hands. Her mind drifted, a montage of memories and moments flickering like an old film reel. She saw herself months ago, broken and grieving, sifting through the storage unit's trash bags, unearthing Frank's hidden past. The letters to Lillian, the birth certificate naming Elijah, the journals confessing his shame. She saw Elijah in Birmingham, restoring an old bench on the Alabama land, his movements echoing Frank's as he sanded away years of neglect. The carved sign of intertwined hands hung above them both, in Atlanta and Alabama, tying their work to Frank's love, a love flawed but enduring, stretching across time to heal what he'd broken. She wiped sweat from her brow, the sandpaper rough against her calluses. Those calluses were new, earned through weeks of labor, a badge of her transformation. She wasn't just Frank's widow anymore, defined by loss or his secrets. She was Annalise Edwards, builder, employer, mother, a woman who'd turned grief into grit. The table gleamed under her touch, ready for a family who'd gather around it, unaware of the story behind its creation. That was enough. In Alabama, Elijah's retreat took shape. He sent updates, a workshop for carpentry classes, a garden where kids planted vegetables, a fire pit for community nights. He'd named it Walker's Rest, a nod to his mother, Lillian, and a quiet tribute to Frank. Annalise visited once, walking the land with him, their boots crunching on new gravel. The pavilion was nearly complete, its beams sturdy and proud, much like Frank's early projects. "He'd love this," she'd said, her voice catching. Elijah nodded, his blue eyes soft. Yeah, he would. Back in Atlanta, Redemption Works grew beyond Annalise's expectations. A local paper ran a feature, calling it a beacon of second chances, and orders poured in. Bed frames for newlyweds, desks for students, even a rocking chair for a veteran's porch. The workshop became a sanctuary, not just for her employees, but for her. Marla's boys stopped by after school, their laughter filling the space as they swept sawdust for pocket money. Javier shared stories of his deployments over lunch, his voice steadier with each telling. Tosha's confidence grew, her sales pitches landing bigger clients, a restaurant chain, a library. Annalise watched them thrive, her heart swelling with a pride she hadn't felt since Chloe's first steps. Chloe, now a regular at the workshop during breaks, brought a digital edge. She set up an online store, live-streamed carving demos, and posted testimonials from customers. "Mom, you're trending," she teased one evening, showing her a video of Javier teaching a kid to use a lathe, racking up thousands of views. Annalise laughed, shaking her head. Your dad would have hated all this tech. But secretly, she loved it, Chloe's energy, the way it wove their family into this new legacy. One evening, as summer crept in and the workshop closed for the day, Annalise swept the floor, the broom's rhythm soothing. The sign above the door caught her eye, those intertwined hands, black and white, carved by Frank in their early years. It wasn't a monument to his mistakes, she realized, but proof of love's endurance. His love for her, for Chloe, for Elijah, even for Lillian, had been imperfect but real, stretching across decades to find resolution here. She touched the carving, her fingers tracing the familiar lines, and felt a peace settle deep within. A letter arrived the next morning, tucked among bills and junk mail. Elijah's handwriting, steady and familiar now, greeted her. She opened it at the kitchen table, coffee steaming beside her. Annalise, Walker's Rest is alive. Kids were here yesterday, planting seeds in the garden. I taught a boy how to carve a birdhouse. Felt like Dad was there, guiding my hands. You were right to share the money. We turned his guilt into grace, didn't we? Thank you for finding me, for giving me a piece of him. Come back soon. The land's waiting. Elijah. Tears pricked her eyes, but they were warm, not heavy. She tucked the letter into a drawer, beside Frank's final note. Redemption Works hummed outside, Marla's laughter drifting through the open window as she taught Tosha a new technique. Chloe's laptop glowed from the living room, updating the website. In Alabama, Elijah was building too. Frank's secrets had once threatened to bury her, but now they'd given her purpose. A workshop, a community, a family extended beyond blood. Annalise stepped outside, the evening air soft with jasmine. The workshop's sign glowed under the porch light, those hands intertwined forever. She smiled, whispering to the man who'd started it all. We did it, Frank. We made it right. Spring bloomed across Atlanta, the air thick with pollen and promise, as dogwoods unfurled their white petals like tiny flags of surrender. On a bright Saturday morning, Annalise rose early, the house quiet except for the distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower. Today was for Frank, not the man of secrets she'd uncovered in the storage unit, but the husband who'd loved her fiercely, whose calloused hands had built their life against the odds. She dressed simply, jeans, a soft green blouse, her hair pulled back to show the silver streaks she no longer hid. In her hands, she carried a bouquet of lilies, their scent sharp and clean, and a small wooden box, one of Javier's first creations at Redemption Works, its surface polished to a warm sheen. The cemetery was a half-hour drive, tucked in a quiet corner of the city, where oaks stood sentinel over weathered stones. Annalise parked near the entrance, her boots crunching on the gravel path as she walked to Frank's grave. The marker was modest, as he'd have wanted. Franklin Edwards, 1970 to 2024, beloved husband and father. No mention of Elijah, of Lillian, of the life he'd buried. But that was why she was here, to honor all of him, the broken and the beautiful. She knelt, brushing away stray leaves, and placed the lilies at the base of the stone. The wooden box came next, set gently on the grass. Inside was a photo, taken weeks ago at Redemption Works' grand opening. Annalise, Elijah, and Chloe standing in front of the workshop, the sign of intertwined hands gleaming above them. Elijah's arm was slung around Chloe's shoulders, his firefighter's grin wide. Chloe held a hammer, her smile all frank, and Annalise stood between them, her eyes bright with a pride she hadn't felt in years. The box also held a tiny carving, a replica of Frank's unity symbol, crafted by Marla's steady hands during a late-night shift. Annalise traced the gravestone's letters, her fingers lingering on beloved. "You couldn't fix it, Frank," she whispered, her voice steady but soft, "but you gave us the pieces to rebuild." The words carried the weight of their journey, from the shock of the storage unit's secrets to the pain of his hidden past, through the choice to share his wealth with Elijah, to the workshops now thriving in Atlanta and Alabama. She'd been angry once, felt betrayed by his silence, but standing here, she saw the truth. Frank's love had been imperfect but enduring, stretching across decades to unite them all. She sat back on her heels, the morning sun warming her face. Memories flickered like a montage. Frank teaching her to sand wood, his laughter as Chloe toddled through sawdust, their quiet nights defying Atlanta's stares with their interracial love. Then the darker frames, letters to Lillian, Elijah's birth certificate, the journals confessing his shame. But those had led to this. Redemption Works, where widows like Marla found purpose, where veterans like Javier rebuilt confidence, where Tosha's sales kept the lights on. And in Alabama, Walker's Rest, where Elijah taught kids to plant gardens and carve wood, healing the land Frank had sold to atone for his mistakes. The cemetery was quiet, save for birdsong and the distant hum of traffic. Annalise stayed a while, letting the peace settle. She didn't need to speak aloud anymore. Frank was in the lilies, the box, the life she'd reclaimed. As she stood, brushing grass from her knees, a breeze stirred the oaks, carrying the scent of spring. She drove home with the windows down, the photo in her mind. Her Elijah, Chloe, united under Frank's legacy. Back at the house, the mailbox held a surprise. A thick envelope, postmarked from Birmingham. Elijah's handwriting, now as familiar as Frank's, greeted her. She carried it to the kitchen table, the same table where she'd first faced his secrets over a year ago, when foreclosure loomed and grief was her only companion. Inside the envelope was a legal document, its pages crisp and official, a deed transfer for the Alabama land, now titled to the Edwards Walker Foundation. A note was tucked inside, Elijah's words simple but heavy. "Annalise, the land's ours now, yours, mine, Chloe's. The foundation will keep Walker's Rest going, for the community, for Dad's memory. You gave me more than money. You gave me a piece of him I thought I'd lost. We're family now, aren't we? Come see the pavilion next month." The kids carved their names into the beams. "You'll like it, Elijah." Tears welled, but they were warm, born of gratitude rather than pain. Annalise smiled through them, clutching the deed. Frank's past hadn't destroyed her life. It had expanded it, weaving her story with Elijah's, with Chloe's, with the men and women who worked beside her. The Edwards Walker Foundation wasn't just a name. It was a promise, a bridge between Frank's two families, his two lives. She imagined the Alabama land now. The pavilion finished, kids running through the garden, Elijah teaching them to whittle sticks into tiny boats for the creek. And in Atlanta, Redemption Works thrived, its tables and chairs carrying stories of second chances into homes across the city. She walked to the workshop, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the driveway. The sign above the door gleamed, those intertwined hands, one black, one white, standing proud. Inside, the space hummed with activity. Marla was guiding a new hire, a young widow named Keisha, through the art of staining oak, their laughter mingling with the whine of a saw. Javier sanded a bookshelf, his focus meditative, while Tosha packed a custom order for a local cafe, her voice bright as she chatted with a client on the phone. Chloe's laptop sat open on a workbench, its screen glowing with a new social media post. A video of Keisha's first finished piece, captioned, "Crafting Hope, one cut at a time." Annalise paused at the door, her hand tracing the carved hands, their curves worn smooth by time and touch. This was Frank's true legacy, not the secrets he'd buried in a storage unit, not the guilt that had haunted him, but the love that endured through her, through Elijah, through the lives they were rebuilding. The workshop smelled of cedar and possibility, a scent that carried her back to their early days, when Frank would wink at her over a pile of lumber, saying, "We're making something real here." They still were. She stepped inside, joining Marla and Keisha, offering a tip on brush strokes that Frank had taught her years ago. The women nodded, their hands steady, their futures brighter than they'd been months before. Outside, the Atlanta sky stretched wide, clouds parting to reveal a horizon that felt infinite. Annalise thought of Elijah, of the kids carving their names into Alabama beams, of Chloe's dreams for the business. Frank's mistakes had been heavy, but they'd led to this, grace woven from guilt, unity from division. As evening fell, she stood alone at the workshop's front door, her fingers lingering on the carved symbol one last time. The streetlights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the sign, and she felt Frank's presence, not as a ghost, but as a quiet strength in the wood, in the lives she'd touched. She closed her eyes, the moral of her journey rising like a voiceover in her mind. Sometimes the things we inherit look like trash, until we open them and find the truth shining beneath.